All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne, and it's my job to unpack the mental fitness practices and the stories of people living at the top of their game, personally and professionally. Today we have Kim on the show, personal trainer, holistic health coach, and creator at Melissa Wood Health. Just to name a few things. There's a bunch of interesting topics I think that we're going to get into just based on our previous conversation. So I can't wait, Kim. Who are you? And who are you today? Because I know that evolves.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Who am I today? Who am I today? I am a woman that really is almost 42 years old, who has found her voice, is using it, and really, stepping out of that people pleasing era, or like being afraid of what people might think if I say how I feel. And so I feel like a woman who's really stepped into her power and into her voice.
So what is that? Finding your voice, stepping into your power. Like, what does that look and feel like for you? How'd you get there?
Oh, it's been a long journey. Let me tell you. Lots of therapy.
Sure.
Lots of therapy. Lots of self-work. Lots of those questions. And lots of, not to say mistakes, but lots of learnings. Lots
Sure.
of bad relationships, not great jobs. And, really learning and looking back at my childhood, learning more about myself, looking at where I picked up those habits or patterns. And it's really been a journey. And there is something to be said about your 40s. I feel like that it just really becomes clear, and you start to clear out and start surrounding yourself with the, people that are aligned with you and moving forward and pushing you to be better. And it's just been a journey.
No kidding. I can imagine. Yeah. Well, thanks for the preview, because I'm going to be, by the time we record this or release this, I'll be turning 40 this year.
Welcome.
So, welcome. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, the 30s have been a hell of a ride, I would say. But I resonate with what you're saying in the sense of a lot. Seems like, at least for me, it seems like for you, a lot of self-discovery, a lot of, kind of trials of different things, and realizing, where the sweet spots are, and what's, I guess almost coming to the realization of who am I not?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I really all that I said mistakes at first, but really looking at the things that didn't work, and whether it's a job or a relationship or friendship, and really looking back and seeing, it might have felt so terrible at the time, but what comes out of it is always so much better. But being able to have that lens to look at things as they happen, for you, not to you, and what comes from that. Because every time something, I think we talked about this the other day, every time something is fallen apart, it always, to me, works out better than I could have ever imagined. But in that spiral,
it doesn't feel great.
No, it doesn't. But I think that anytime that's happened to me is when, if I can remind myself, I can look back and I can go, okay, well, something similar happened at this point, and this is how I was feeling the same way. And then be able to fast forward and see what came out of that. And I can always see that I ended up in a better place, and, a better version of myself, and whatever it was, all the things, whether again, relationship or work, worked out better than I could have ever imagined. That anytime I have a moment where I start to spiral, I ask myself, has this happened before? And what came out of it? And then that gives me that space to kind of breathe and have faith that it will work out again.
I love those questions. Do you have, what does that practically look like for you? Is that a journaling flow? Do you, when you're in those moments, do you, okay, there's another one of these situations, I'm going to intentionally schedule some time to let the mind breathe a little bit? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of morning pages from the artist, which really they're Cameron. It's just that writing, and I am always impressed with how much actually comes out. when I do my morning pages. But then if there is a time that I am struggling with something, I absolutely ask the question in my journal. And I often ask the question, and I guess it's kind of that practice of really giving it over, which also fan of Marianne Williamson for years. And I really start my day every day with those questions, which is really A Course in Miracles, which is, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? Who would you have me talk to? And what would you have me say? And so that every day, that's how I start the day. And so in my journaling, when I'm having those spinning moments, I often will ask the question, but I really give it over. And I know that it will come. It might not come in that journaling session, but it does come. And there's something to me that, it's so we're not in this alone. And I find that sometimes when I'm stressed, I feel it's like me against the world. But when I remember that there's a higher power and truly there is a path for me, and I can give those questions over, you feel taken care of, you feel protected, you don't feel so alone in the spiral.
Yeah. Well, there's just some comfort, I think, just knowing that you have some of those tools and that you've experienced those questions, right? And that you're not in it alone, but you also don't have to spin in those narratives for longer than, is required. I mean, I say that's a bit of a heavy word to say required, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's not about trying to push down emotions. Like, you want to feel the feels, but you also don't need it to completely hijack your days, weeks, months, years, right? And turn into something even bigger, which is the whole essentially the whole mission of this show, is just to provide some of these tools, right? And especially the questions, and just give ourselves the opportunity to be able to leverage these things as we're going through the big moments in our own lives.
Yeah. I think there's something too that, maybe it's only recently that I've really noticed as well, is that when you acknowledge the fear, or you acknowledge the anxiety, just the acknowledgement and the awareness of it can actually quell that feeling. Where if you kind of are stressed and you're kind of in that spiral or having that mental chatter, and you don't take the moment to acknowledge it and breathe in, also allow it to be there. Like, it's okay to have those feelings because we're human and we all have them. But sometimes I think in the past, I've fought that feeling so hard because I don't want to feel fear. I don't want to feel stress, or I don't want to feel upset. But the second you actually acknowledge it and make it okay to feel the feeling, it actually calms down and becomes a little more quiet upstairs.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I'd love to just set a little bit of context for the listeners. If you want to just share a little bit of, I guess, your professional journey of where how you even got involved in the work that you're doing right now. And then I definitely, just given the timing of what's going on in your life, like, you shared something pretty personal recently on the socials about just some medical challenges that you've unfortunately had to go through for quite some time. Seems like a couple decades of how the language, I like the language you use, like chasing symptoms. And I think there's a lot of us in different diseases or different challenges, but are kind of in that of chasing these symptoms and trying to, almost like left on our own to try to figure this stuff out. So I'd love to spend some time there. But before that, what's kind of the short story of how you got involved in just health and helping people with their own well-being?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I kind of popped out. Like, my mom really couldn't keep me still. I was bouncing off the wall. So she just kind of put me in gymnastics because she didn't really know what else to do with the energy that I had. So from 3 years old, I was really in gymnastics and dance, and I started running when I was 10. So I was always a very active child, and I was quite strong when I was really young. And so I was kind of this like little athlete. And I was hospitalized when I always get these confused because I had a bad concussion and I also was sick and undiagnosed with Lyme and hospitalized for 2 weeks. And the doctors really couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And, basically were pumping me with antibiotics and steroids, but I had every symptom of Lyme disease. So like flu-like symptoms, body aches, ringing in my ears, all the things. And then kind of like sent me on my merry little way. And my mom likes to say that I never came back the same. Like I was super strong, but there was something that was a bit different in my athleticism at the time at such a young age. But then I did kind of bounce back, but I would have these bouts of fatigue in high school, in college, and started to get really bad migraines, and I was having stomach issues. And I kind of had all of these like different things that I started chasing the symptoms, seeing different doctors for. And oftentimes at a young age, I didn't eat meat for 16 years. So a lot of times doctors would say like, oh, you don't eat meat, you don't have iron, you're anemic, that's why you're tired. Or, oh, you're doing too much, because I was running track and then going to tumbling practice and was doing too much. And it was never looked at. But again, like a pill was thrown at me. So whether it was an antibiotic or a steroid or an iron pill or, being told I needed to not do anything. And so I just always really pushed through these times and never really thought anything of it until I kind of got into my later 20s, and all of those symptoms I was living with almost on a daily basis, where I was having terrible migraines. I was having ringing in my ears, brain fog. My memory I would forget people. I'd forget their names and forget where I was going, walking to work, and I'd have to stop. I started writing down where I was going because I couldn't actually remember. That
must have been terrifying.
It was terrifying. Yeah. No one understood. And at the time, and now we've like fast forwarded into my 20s, which I was a phys ed major in college, dropped out, but got my training certification at 21 through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. So became a trainer because to me, I've always loved helping people. I was teaching gymnastics and tumbling to cheerleaders when I was in high school, and I really loved helping people. I also really loved being active. So to me, I wanted other people to feel the joy that I felt. I think in 8th grade, I started a fitness club. Like I just loved it. It was an escape for me. And kind of like my household was a bit hectic with my parents. And so I think it was also a bit of an escape for me. It was my safe place. It was also, it was a bit of a meditative place, a peaceful place for me to go and move my body, get out of my head. And I wanted other people to have that place because it helped me feel good. So I always wanted to share that with other people from such a young age, that then turned me to becoming a personal trainer in my 20s. But then, when I started to really have all of these symptoms accumulating and not really knowing what was going on with me, it was really frustrating. And I shared with you the other day, I was also fitness modeling. And it was this really strange time because I was this supposed to be like fitness person. And magazines at the time that would be like, more energy now. And it's like my face or me doing a backflip. And I felt awful inside. So I also had this weird feeling that I couldn't share that I wasn't feeling well because I was supposed to be healthy. And I should have been healthy, right? I was working out, I was eating well and doing all the things that, I should have been the picture of health. So it was this weird place for me to actually share that I didn't feel well in it. And oftentimes people would say to me, well, like, you don't look sick. So, which to me, I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm dying on the inside, but I guess I look okay. And so it was a very strange time to be sick. And then also chasing those symptoms, seeing every doctor under the sun and really being medically gaslit by doctors. And I shared on my Instagram, I had a doctor tell me for my GI issues that I needed a boyfriend and to go on vacation. and then my stomach would feel better. And, and,
thanks.
I was, and also was told multiple times that I was depressed and it was in my head. And then I would cry in the doctor's office and then they would be like, see, you're depressed. And I went on antidepressants at one point because I thought, I don't know, enough doctors told me that I was, maybe I am. Did I create this? Did I manifest this illness in my body? Did I cause this? And then I went on antidepressants. And after 6 months of being on them, I realized it was easier to maybe like deal with the feeling of being sick, but I was still sick and I was still being pumped with antibiotics and steroids. And really was making all of my symptoms that much worse because then I had candida, which is yeast overgrowth in the body. I had yeast coating my sinus cavity at one point, but was still being pumped with antibiotics and steroids for chronic sinus and upper respiratory infections. And it was really through that process and then finally being diagnosed with Lyme disease and seeing a wonderful functional medicine doctor here in the city, Dr. Frank Lipman, who changed my diet, who really listened and really through what I was eating. And I was eating well. I was eating, I was a vegetarian for 16 years. And I was like, well, I'm healthy. Dr. Littman basically had me do a candida protocol, but told me I could really only have green vegetables and protein. And I told him I didn't eat protein. And he was like, well, you're either going to be really hungry or you're going to start eating meat. And that night I had a filet. And I was so willing to do anything. And really like 2 weeks into changing my diet, I felt like a different person. And when that happened, it was such a kind of an eye-opening experience that I was like, wow, like I could change how I feel just by what I'm putting in my body. And I wish more people knew that because, again, I was seeing the top doctors in the city. I'd gone through my savings account, put myself into debt. I was seeing the best of the best. And no one said anything about food. And no one said anything about meditation. And it was also reading Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, and looking at what my inner dialogue was and how I was speaking to myself because I was so frustrated with how I was feeling and fell into that kind of victim feeling of like, why is this happening to me? And no one understands. And again, that me against the world kind of feeling. And it got really dark in that time. And I think that, yes, I was a personal trainer and kind of in the wellness world, but it was really going through my health journey that made me want to do things differently and help people in a different way. And I ended up going to the Institute of Integrated Nutrition to get my health coaching certification and really wanted to help people kind of go, if anyone was going through what I was going through, to be able to kind of fast track them, to not have to run to all of those doctors. Just really be able to listen to people. I think that's such a key piece we're missing in our medical system.
Well, it sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine like just for the conversation, like things are kind of sped up. And when we talk about these kind of situations in our lives, they're almost talked about as if like, okay, I did this, I did that, but like years, you're talking about years here. Like that's a long time.
Yeah.
Right? Like how did you keep going? Like how did you keep, I guess, what's the question I'm trying to answer? Like, because it seems like, okay, you could just fold to the pressure of the exhaustion of, right? Because you're essentially, unfortunately, and this is still happening to this day for the most part, like we have to go against the system,
right,
which is tiring in itself. And then do all the research and then answer all the right questions. So like for you, what was it that kept you asking those questions that eventually got you to the right help?
Yeah. I feel like this is a big one to share, but I'm going to give it to you. I don't often talk about this one, but I think it was such a dark time for me. And there were moments where like I really would pray to not wake up in the morning because I was just like, I can't live like this. I can't go on like this. But then I would keep waking up. And so And then really, like, I had no choice. I had my rent to pay, I had my bills to pay. And so I would go to work and I would, kind of go through the motions of my day, even though I didn't feel well. And I would put on, and especially if it was a modeling job, put on a smile and jump 87 times to do what, to
Yeah.
pay my rent. And so I didn't, I hate to say that I didn't have a choice, but in that not having a choice, I knew I wasn't well. Like, I knew that I wasn't crazy. I knew that I wasn't creating this illness. And so then I started to get really curious. And
Mhm.
honestly, I really tried a million different things, but it was reading Louise Hay's book, and it was doing mirror work and those affirmations, and going to listen to Marianne Williamson speak in person, every Tuesday at a church on in the East Village.
Yeah.
Really looking to prayer and really kind of and sitting with it and starting to meditate and really kind of going inward. And it did get lonely. I stopped going out. I wasn't feeling well. I felt like people didn't understand. I wasn't drinking anymore. And not that I drank a lot to begin with, but it was amazing to, like, be out and be social, and everyone was drinking and then I wasn't. And then kind of getting made fun of for not drinking. And so I
Yeah.
really went inward for a while and figured, okay, like, I not that I recommend this either. I just kept opening credit cards because I was like, I'm going to see every doctor until I get to the bottom of this. And it was not fun paying off that debt, I will tell you. But
Yeah.
I just knew. I knew that this wasn't the way to live, and I knew there had to be an answer. And I was willing to keep going until I found the right doctors. And then eventually I did, and started to feel better. I mean, but it was a long journey. And again, for me, that's where my hope always is to help someone fast track that and not have to
Hmm.
go through all those hoops and put themselves into debt and, you know, keep
Yeah.
going to doctors to tell them they're not sick or it's in their head. And so my hope is to just help people to not go through what I went through.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, am quite happy your initial prayers were not answered and you're here
And
with us today because you're helping so many people, through the various programs that you have and the work that you do. And we really need that because and this is not, there are good doctors out there. I think that it's the system that I think is failing us. And ultimately then you get wrapped up as an individual physician as well into that system. I think it's hard. It's hard to kind of buck out of that. But thankfully there's people like yourself and a lot of great people out in this world that are trying to change this, right? Like we need it to evolve. I think that's at the end of the day. I mean, Western medicine, for one thing, I think like it serves a good purpose in many different ways, but it's also very outdated in the vast majority of the setup. Like I would like to go to the hospital if I break a bone.
right,
For almost everything else,
right,
I don't want to go there.
no, great.
Because you're almost worse off. It's wild. What's just to kind of wrap this up, since I mentioned it, the latest health challenge that you were able to solve was a
Yeah,
pretty big one as well, where you kind of self-describe yourself as an endo warrior, and so I'd
yeah,
love to talk a little bit more about that because just in my own circle, I know quite a few women that have struggled with what you went through. So, I think, and just even judging by the amount of comments on that one post that you really opened up about, I mean, there's people struggling.
yeah. And it was, again, a little funny for me when I found out I had endometriosis, which I found out last year in January when I was freezing my eggs. And which is so wild to me because I had so many symptoms of endometriosis. And again, was in the hospital with ovarian cysts rupturing. I had polyps removed. I had an ectopic pregnancy. I had all of these GI issues that, again, SIBO and IBS are like go hand in hand with endometriosis, but no one ever said any of those things. And no doctor was ever able to string any of that together. And finding out I had endometriosis, I also had this moment, kind of like I did with Lyme disease, where there was a moment of shame of like, I shouldn't have this. I'm healthy. I follow, a paleo lifestyle. I reduce inflammation. I sauna and I cold plunge and hyperbaric chamber and I have tumor. I do all these things. Like, how did this happen? And I was a little hesitant to share again because of that same thing. Like, I should be healthy. How did this happen? And I really had to take a moment and realize I also think that I got to 41 and kind of was able to maintain this because of the way that I live my life. Like, maybe it would have been a million times worse. And maybe I would have had surgery earlier in my life or, had more cyst rupture or whatever it is if I wasn't living this lifestyle, and kind of really give myself the grace and allow myself to be human and have endometriosis. And I was really shocked in sharing how many other women reached out that have endo, that have had the surgery, or also are struggling with similar symptoms. And again, being told, think that they have it, but are being told that they don't and aren't, again, like that kind of being gaslit or dismissed by doctors. But there's something off when we really listen to our body. And again, coming back to meditation, all the things, like if we really tap into our body, we know. Yeah. And so I think, again, it's finding the right doctor to listen. I got really lucky with my fertility doctor. She was incredible. And she was the one that said, like, I think you have endometriosis. And after my process, we went back and did a series of tests and, found out that I did have an endometrioma and my tube was blocked and my intestines were stuck to my uterus and I had endo on my intestines, which was causing all of these gut issues. And I remember crying in the appointment, not because I had it, but because there was this moment of like, I knew it. I knew something was off. And it was just like that acknowledgement of like, you're not crazy. Like, this
lifting that weight,
your body. And so sharing that journey and that post, my hope is always like, if one other person reads it, that's like, oh my God, this is happening to me too, and I'm not crazy, then it's worth sharing it, because not enough people, are getting the right help or sharing it. And I think there's our share and our voice goes much further than we ever realized.
Yeah. Well, from what I can see at this point, I mean, there's definitely multiple hundreds of people that I think have been impacted by you sharing your story. So again, like I commend your bravery for doing that. And it's not easy. And I get that. I mean, we talked about this when we first met. Like on my side, on the mental fitness side, there's often comments around like, or assumptions that because I work in this space and have access to so many of these practices and tools and speak to people like yourself and am always learning different, modalities, that it's like my mind is like this like happy fest or something, and there's never challenges, which is like, couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, yes, I feel really grateful that I have a toolkit, but like the rest of us go up and down and like have bad days and almost, I think sometimes, you might resonate with this, I think sometimes it's worse because I feel like our self-awareness is boosted so much higher because of those practices that like you feel it, you see it, like, oh, like I would have missed that 10 years ago,
right? Absolutely.
It's, what helped in processing or releasing that shame? Because a lot of the people listening to this show are very motivated humans. They're doing things for themselves. And I imagine, and I put myself in this as well, like they're different circumstances probably, or maybe not, but have those same feelings of like, I'm doing the work, like I'm really going for it. Like, why, how is this happening? Like, so how did you How did you release that?
Yeah, I think it's still a practice.
Sure.
I really think it's my therapist we've been working together for a little over a year, and I've had other ones prior, but I don't know. His name is Dr. Nicholas Bruss. He's in Los Angeles, and he is absolutely incredible. And I think that he really just we really discovered how hard I was being on myself. And for whatever reason, through all the years of therapy and Hoffman and all the things I've done, I never realized how much pressure I put on myself. And then with that pressure and trying to be not perfect, but then if I wasn't, came that shame. And so I think it was really learning self-compassion. And again, it is a practice that I am still practicing.
Sure.
I can certainly have my moments where which I shared with you in having this downtime post-surgery, I have quickly found myself in the not doing anything. I start to feel like I should be doing more. Oh my God, I'm not working. And what if things don't work out? And I can kind of get back into that little spiral and put that pressure on myself. But again, it's in the noticing when it arises. And like I said before too, it's just in that now I can notice it when it happens, and just in the awareness of it and acknowledging it, and then asking sometimes like, well, what are you afraid of? And then sitting with that answer. And it's amazing that once you acknowledge it and allow it to be there, it goes away, or it starts to get a little more quiet. But if you don't acknowledge it, it will just keep. I love to say that I spin.
Spin. I resonate with that.
But
sure.
But it's really in the acknowledging and allowing it to be there, allowing the fear to be there, allowing the shame to be there, the anxiety to be there, and then just having a moment with it, sometimes ask it what it's trying to show me. And I think, again, that practice really came from my therapist, because he will have me do that in session. And then that has really allowed me to do that on my own, and has been such a big shift for me when I do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what comes to mind is just in how we opened the show and what you shared, with your backstory. Like, you've just you just went through, a surgery. It's been a couple weeks of recovering, and you can't do the physical things that you've literally been doing since you're 3 years old.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of programming to just, I'm not doing this anymore for the next 2, when you probably need it the most, given, you just went through that, right? So a little self-love to Kim, I think, because I'm not surprised. I feel like anyone would struggle with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely been a challenge not to move my body. And it's been challenging. And it just is, again, coming back to that, sitting in my meditation, doing my journaling, doing my gratitude, which you actually helped remind me to really even just celebrate those small wins. And, I'll look at my gratitude in kind of a bigger picture, but I wasn't really applying it to my post-surgery of like, oh, wow, like thankful I can roll over today and it not stabbing pain in my stomach, or, those baby steps of being grateful for, because it absolutely is a progression, and I'm getting better, but you helped me. So thank you.
Oh, received. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're in 2024. This episode will be coming out early January. What's the version of Kim this year? Because you've gone through, there's been some physical changes that I imagine, almost unleash another version of yourself, or elements and so forth. Are you starting to feel that? Are you putting that out kind of into the universe? Like, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I think that it's funny with this surgery, a lot came up for me in this surgery. All right, makes me like, oh. I think I also realized like how much I push my body. And so it really like had me take a step back and be like, wow, like my body's actually so sensitive. And I just realized I need to kind of protect my body a little more than I have in the past. And so that has really been eye-opening for me and brought up so many different things, and which I'm grateful for and certainly working through. And I think that moving into this year more than ever, it's just that emphasis on really taking care of ourselves in such, and again, like, I was a personal trainer from the age of 21 and certainly grew up in gymnastics with that like no pain, no gain mentality, which has stopped a long time ago, but really honing in now, at this age and in this year, just what self-care really looks like and what taking care of our body really looks like and what listening to our intuition really means and what saying no feels like. Really kind of setting those boundaries too, and just in every aspect. And it doesn't just apply to the physical, it applies to relationships and to business, and really like taking care of myself differently. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I feel
it does.
2024 is really just really taking care of myself with so much love and care, and really doing the things that light me up and saying no to the things that don't feel good. And then hopefully, that feeling bleeds over into everything, into business, into all the things I'm doing, into love and relationships and friendships, and and knowing that the things that are meant to be will be, and the things that don't like this version or the version that says no, then like those things fall away and they weren't serving me anyway.
That's beautiful. I mean, we could all take a little bit of that. That's for sure. I mean, I'm smiling just listening to your answer. So already kind of the ripple effect of you putting that out there is I can feel it, and I'm sure listeners can feel it as well. My last question for you, just present day, I mean, what makes you smile each day?
Oh my goodness. What makes me smile each day? Turning on house music.
Yes.
If I'm ever having a moment where I'm feeling a little down, it's amazing what a great playlist can do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That this morning I did a breath work practice, and it was really amazing because I honestly, as I was doing it, my brain was like fighting it. Like, I don't want to do this, or maybe I'm only going to do 2 rounds and not 3. And it's amazing that when you actually push yourself sometimes to do like that simple breath work practice, that afterwards, like I did have a smile on my face because it felt so good.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, just like showing up for myself.
Yeah.
Puts that smile on my face.
Love it. Love it. And I have to ask, I mean, how long was that breathwork sequence for you?
It probably was like just under 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, this I had a feeling. So that's why I asked. I mean, we all have that, right?
Well, it started with to be honest with you, I was sitting for meditation and my mind was really active. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a breath work practice like instead or in combination with. And I basically did 3 rounds of 30, like inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, but like a loud inhale, exhale.
Yeah.
And 30, and then you hold the breath out as long as you can. And then when you inhale, hold that inhale for 10 seconds. And I did 3 rounds of that. And so it really wasn't that long, but I really fought it. Round 1, I'm definitely doing 1 round. Like you can do 2 rounds. Round 2, I'm like, why am I doing? Maybe I'll do 15. I won't do 30. It's amazing how
it's so wild, right?
And I'm like, it's only 15 more breaths, and like you can do this.
Yeah.
And then going into that 3rd round was, a bit easier because I had made it through the other two and was able to say to myself it was the final round. But, it's amazing how much better you feel coming out of it with the fight that your mind can put up to do it.
Yeah. But that's the mental fitness. And that's the part that I love, because there's, of course, the immediate benefits that you're describing. But at the same time, we're training our minds to handle that back and forth, which shows up in multiple other areas in our lives, right? It's like you're behind the computer working on, I don't know, some sort of brand presentation that you don't want to do, or you're fighting, but it's this training that actually allows you then to notice that you're doing this and to work through those moments. And I just want to really emphasize that, because it's usually the mental fitness is kind of a two-pronged thing. There's the in the moment, whether that's helping you with a high stress situation or something you need at that moment. But then there's also a lot of the preventative work that you're doing, just like physical fitness. Like it's like you're showing up ready.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Well, you are one beautiful bright light in this world. I am so, so grateful that we have been able to have this conversation and connect. And I really look forward to our friendship continuing, and encourage everyone. I'll put links in the show notes to swing over to your website, check out your work. You're doing a bunch of awesome stuff for individuals, but teams, companies, experiences, retreats. I mean, you can obviously hear your passion, and you marry that up with the story and your journey that you've been through. I mean, it'd be nearly impossible for someone not to get a bunch of value and impact within your presence. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to just continue talking to you and have you in my life. So thank you. I'm so happy we were connected.
Yeah, me too.
And I can't wait to join you on a retreat this year as well.
Yeah, we're going to rock it.
Yeah, perfect.